Welcome back, viewers, to the latest researches and news. Currently, we have three significant developments from across the conflict zone. Firstly, about two semi-aligned armed groups, Gumuz fighters and Fano, have carried out a joint attack on Ethiopian National Defense Force. Secondly, about the Shirena front. And in last, about Ethiopian state-linked media has released a documentary showing individuals presented as Tigray Defense Forces prisoners captured during the Shirena fighting. We analyze what this documentary shows and what you need to know before accepting any of it at face value. Let us begin with a development that represents the ongoing geographic expansion of the resistance coalition. In Ethiopia's Benishangul-Gumuz region, specifically in the medical zone town of Gilgibele's two armed groups, identified as semi-aligned, have carried out a joint attack. The fighters involved were identified by local authorities as Gumuz armed fighters and members of the Fano. The medical zone of Benishangul-Gumuz has been an area of significant instability throughout the past several years. Gumuz fighters, representing one of the indigenous ethnic communities of the Benishangul-Gumuz region, have had a prolonged and violent conflict with the Ethiopian federal government and with communities they see as encroaching on their territory. The Fano, whose primary theater is the Amhara region to the north, has been extending its operational reach beyond core Amhara territory as part of its broader campaign against the Ethiopian federal government. Gilgibele is a strategically important town. It sits in the wider Meteko area near the Sudan border. Critically, it can be accessed from multiple directions simultaneously, which makes it difficult to defend comprehensively and easy for attacking forces to approach through different routes. That multi-directional accessibility is one of the reasons why it is tactically significant. The Meteko Zone administration stated that Gumuz and Fano fighters attacked government facilities in Gilgibele. Security forces intervened, repelled the attack, and inflicted losses on the attackers. Here is where the official account and the ground-level information diverge significantly. Local contacts with direct knowledge of the situation indicate that the main target of the joint attack was not a government administrative facility. It was an Ethiopian National Defense Force military position in Gilgibele. This is an important distinction. Attacking a government administrative building and attacking a military installation are very different in terms of tactical purpose and military significance. If the actual target was an Ethiopian National Defense Force position, as ground sources indicate, then this was a direct military engagement designed to hit federal forces, not simply an attack on civilian administration. The significance of Gumuz fighters and Fano operating together in Benishangul-Gumuz is considerable. These are two groups with very different ethnic identities and community origins, but they share the same strategic opponent in the Ethiopian federal government. Their joint operation in Gilgibele near the Sudan border is another demonstration of the expanding geographic and ethnic breadth of the coalition that is operating against the federal government. If the semi-aligned resistance can sustain operations in Tigray, Amhara, Oromia, and Benishangul-Gumuz simultaneously, the Ethiopian National Defense Force faces an active front in essentially every major region of the country except the capital. Viewers, reports from the Shirena front continue to confirm significant losses on the Ethiopian National Defense Force side, both in personnel and in military equipment. We have previously covered the Gonda hospital surge of wounded Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers, the confirmed captures of Ethiopian National Defense Force personnel documented in multiple independent videos, and the Tigray Defense Forces' claim of 3 tanks and 5 military vehicles destroyed in drone strikes. These reports paint a consistent picture of a costly engagement for the federal forces. Monday's drone strikes southern Tigray. The drone strikes conducted by the Ethiopian National Defense Force against Tigray Defense Forces positions in southern Tigray on Monday in the Merewa and Marawa areas near Raya Alamata produced a different category of result. The reported losses from those strikes were primarily personnel casualties on the Tigray Defense Forces side, wounded and killed Tigray fighters at positions targeted by the strikes. The strikes did not produce the kind of equipment losses and large-scale captures that the Shirena front produced for the Tigray Defense Forces against Ethiopian National Defense Force. So when we look at the two engagements together, the Shirena front was costly for the Ethiopian National Defense Force in both personnel and equipment. The Monday drone strikes were costly for the Tigray Defense Forces, primarily in personnel at the targeted positions. Neither engagement was one-sided. Both sides have taken losses. But the nature and scale of those losses are different. The big question now, how will Tigray's military leadership respond to the Monday drone strikes? The Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Tigray Defense Forces have demonstrated throughout this conflict that they do not absorb attacks without response. After the Shirena front fighting, which the Tigray People's Liberation Front described as an Ethiopian National Defense Force initiated offensive, the response was the formal statement calling it a grave escalation. After drone strikes on Tigray positions, a military response of some form has historically followed. What form that response takes ground operations, further drone counterstrikes, or another category of action is what military analysts are now watching most closely. Whether the response comes quickly or is held until a larger coordinated offensive across multiple fronts is ready, that calculus is being made right now by Tigray Defense Forces commanders. The scale of the Shirena losses on the Ethiopian National Defense Force side and the demonstrated capability of the Tigray Defense Forces to inflict those losses means that a Tigray Defense Forces military response carries real weight. It is not symbolic. It is capable of producing results. Finally, Ethiopian state-linked media has produced and released a documentary. In it, individuals are presented as Tigray Defense Forces prisoners captured during the Shirena front fighting. Some of those shown are being presented as Tigray Defense Forces fighters who have given statements about the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the fighting. We need to give you the analytical framework for evaluating this documentary because it requires a specific kind of critical thinking. The context of prisoner statements. Individuals held as prisoners of war by opposing forces are, by definition, in a position of significant vulnerability. They are in custody. They may face uncertainty about their treatment, their future, and their safety. In that situation, any statement they make, any account they give, any message they deliver to a camera must be understood as potentially shaped by the conditions of their captivity. This is not unique to this conflict. It is a universal principle of evaluating prisoner statements recognized in international humanitarian law and in journalistic ethics globally. The Geneva Conventions specifically address the protection of prisoners from being subjected to public curiosity and prohibit forcing prisoners to make propaganda statements. Statements made on camera by prisoners held by opposing forces are inherently compromised as evidence. We are not saying these individuals are lying. We are saying that you cannot know whether they are speaking freely or speaking under any form of pressure, explicit or implicit, because they are in custody. Their statements should therefore be treated with significant caution and not accepted as straightforward factual evidence. Today's three stories together describe a conflict that is expanding geographically, clarifying in terms of losses on both sides, and being fought simultaneously on the military and information fronts. In Benishangul Gumuz fighters' Fano forces conducted a joint attack in Gilgel Bailes, with ground sources indicating the real target was an Ethiopian National Defense Force military position. The resistance coalition is now active in Benishangul Gumuz. On the Shirena front, significant Ethiopian National Defense Force losses in both personnel and equipment. Monday's drone strikes in southern Tigray produced primarily personnel casualties among Tigray Defense Forces fighters. The big question: how and when does the Tigray Defense Forces respond? An Ethiopian state media has released a prisoner documentary from the Shirena fighting. Prisoner statements must be treated with caution. Individuals in custody may speak under conditions that compromise the freedom of their statements. The documentary is a narrative recovery attempt by a government whose Shirena propaganda plan did not go as intended. We will keep watching every front: military, diplomatic, and informational. Like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update.